Somewhere in the geometry of the universe, you are 7 years old, not as a memory, not as a trace left in the structure of matter, as a present, fully realized physical fact, a configuration of the four-dimensional manifold that is exactly as real, exactly as present, exactly as existent as the configuration you currently occupy. Somewhere in the same geometry, you are dying. The moment of your death is not a future event that has not yet happened. It is a coordinate in space-time that exists with the same ontological completeness as this moment. And somewhere in that geometry, every version of you that has ever drawn breath or made a decision or registered an experience is present simultaneously, not sequentially. Not as a progression from one state to the next, but as a single, complete, four-dimensional object whose full extent across time is as fixed and as real as its extent across space. This is not a philosophical thought experiment. It is the direct implication of the best confirmed physical theory in the history of science. General relativity does not describe a universe that unfolds through time. It describes a universe that simply is a four-dimensional block of space-time in which every event, from the formation of the first stars to the final dispersal of matter in the far future, occupies a fixed coordinate in a geometric structure that does not change, does not evolve, and does not have a preferred moment called the present. The present is not a feature of the universe, it is a feature of your position within the universe, and your position does not make your present more real than any other moment. It makes it more accessible. The past is not gone. The future is not absent. They are regions of the block that your current position cannot causally reach, but unreachable is not the same as unreal. The geometry does not distinguish between them on grounds of existence. It distinguishes between them only on grounds of causal connectivity. What this means for the concept of a life, for the concept of identity across time, for the question of what you are when the full extent of your temporal existence is considered, has not been absorbed into ordinary thinking about the self. Physics has accepted the block universe as the natural reading of relativistic spacetime for over a century. Philosophy has debated its implications with varying degrees of seriousness, but neither discipline has fully confronted what it means to say that every moment of every life you have lived is simultaneously present in the geometry of the universe, that the child and the adult and the dying person are all equally real features of the same four-dimensional object, and that the experience of moving through time, the felt sense of a life progressing from birth toward death, is not a feature of the geometry. It is a feature of the way awareness is structured within the geometry. It is, in the most precise sense available, an internal experience of a structure that from outside has no flow at all. The full account of what this means and why the mathematics requires it, and what it implies for identity, death, free will, and the nature of experience itself is what follows. The physics underlying the block universe begins not with Einstein, but with the problem that Einstein inherited, the problem of reconciling the behavior of light with the mechanics of moving bodies. By the end of the 19th century, Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism had established that light propagates through empty space at a fixed speed, approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. This was a precise, mathematically derived result, but it created an immediate conceptual difficulty. In Newtonian mechanics, speeds are relative. If you move toward a source of light, you expect to measure the light as traveling faster relative to you. If you move away from it, you expect to measure it as traveling slower. This is how velocities add in classical mechanics. It is how all other wave phenomena behave when the observer moves relative to the medium through which they propagate. But light did not behave this way. Experiments conducted with extraordinary precision in the late 19th century, most famously by Albert Michelson and Edward Morley, found no variation in the measured speed of light with the motion of the observer. The speed was the same regardless of whether the observer was moving toward the light source or away from it, and regardless of the direction of motion relative to the Earth's orbital velocity around the Sun. The result was perplexing. If light always travels at the same speed relative to all observers, then the simple addition of velocities that works for everything else does not work for light. And if it does not work for light, then something fundamental about the relationship between space and time must be different from what Newtonian mechanics assumed. Einstein's resolution, published in 1905, was to accept the constancy of the speed of light as an absolute postulate, not as a fact requiring explanation, but as a foundational principle from which everything else must be derived, and to work out what the geometry of space and time must be in order to be consistent with it. The result was special relativity. And the central geometric insight of special relativity is that space and time are not separate independent structures. They are aspects of a single four-dimensional structure, space-time, whose geometry is what remains invariant when observers in relative motion disagree about spatial and temporal measurements. Two observers moving relative to each other will measure different lengths for the same object and different durations for the same process, but they will agree on a combined space-time quantity, the space-time interval, that mixes their spatial and temporal measurements in a specific way. The space-time interval is the invariant. Space alone and time alone are observer-dependent. Space-time is not. This unification of space and time into a single geometric object was made mathematically explicit by Hermann Minkowski, who reformulated special relativity as the geometry of a four-dimensional manifold with a specific metric signature. Minkowski's formulation made the geometric content of relativity transparent. Space-time is not space with time added as an independent parameter. It is a four-dimensional manifold in which spatial and temporal directions are mixed by the symmetries of the theory, in which the distinction between space and time is real but not absolute, and in which the geometry, the set of invariant relationships between events, is the fundamental structure. Events are points in this manifold. Physical processes are curves, world lines through it, and the full history of any physical system from its beginning to its end is a curve in the geometry, fully present as a geometric object, not unfolding through the geometry as through a medium. Einstein's general relativity, published in 1915, extended this picture to include gravity. In general relativity, the flat Minkowski geometry of special relativity is replaced by a curved Lorentzian geometry, whose curvature is determined by the distribution of matter and energy. Gravity is not a force acting between masses. It is the curvature of space-time generated by those masses, and what we call gravitational attraction is the tendency of objects to follow the straightest possible paths, geodesics, through that curved geometry. The field equations of general relativity relate the geometry of space-time to its matter content, and their solutions are entire space-time geometries, four-dimensional manifolds describing the full history of a universe from its initial conditions to its final state. The solutions are not descriptions of how the universe evolves through time. They are descriptions of the complete four-dimensional geometry of the universe, with time included as one of the dimensions of the geometry. The universe, in a solution to Einstein's field equations, does not change. It simply is what it is, geometrically, from boundary to boundary. This is the block universe, and its most important feature, the one that most directly challenges ordinary intuition, is that it has no preferred present. In Newtonian mechanics, there was a global now, a moment that was simultaneously present everywhere in the universe, dividing the past from the future, advancing forward at a uniform rate. This global now was the basis for the intuitive picture of time as a river, flowing from past to future, carrying all of reality on its surface. Special relativity abolished the global now. If two observers are in relative motion, they disagree about which events are simultaneous. There is no fact of the matter about which observer is right. Simultaneity is not a property of events, it is a property of reference frames. And since no reference frame is privileged, no definition of now is privileged. The universe does not have a present moment, it has a geometry. And within that geometry, every event is equally present, equally real, equally part of the complete four-dimensional structure, from the perspective of the geometry itself, which has no perspective, which simply is. The philosophical position that corresponds most naturally to this geometric picture is called eternalism, or the block universe view. On this view, past, present, and future events are all equally real. The past does not cease to exist when it is no longer accessible from the present. The future does not fail to exist because it has not yet been reached. All events exist, timelessly, as features of the four-dimensional geometric structure. What changes with the passage of time is not which events exist, but which events are accessible from a given position in the geometry. The past is the region of the block that is causally behind you. The future is the region that is causally ahead. The present is the set of events that are causally simultaneous with your current position, a set that is, by the relativity of simultaneity, defined differently for different observers. But none of these distinctions tracks a difference in existence. They track differences in causal accessibility within a structure whose total content is fixed. This is the standard narrative. It is taught in physics courses. It is accepted by the overwhelming majority of physicists who work with relativity. It is, within its domain, an extraordinarily well-confirmed account of the geometric structure of space-time, and its implications for the nature of time, identity, and experience are acknowledged, at least formally, by most physicists who think carefully about what the theory implies. But there is a problem. The block universe, as a complete account of physical reality, faces a difficulty that is not merely philosophical. It is not simply that the block universe conflicts with our intuitive sense that time flows, that the present is special, that the future is open in a way the past is not. And intuitions can be wrong, and physics has corrected them before. The difficulty is that the block universe is a description drawn entirely from general relativity, and general relativity is not a complete theory. It is a classical theory, a theory that does not incorporate the principles of quantum mechanics, and when quantum mechanics is brought into contact with the block universe picture, the contact produces a set of tensions that the block universe in its standard formulation has no resources to resolve. The first tension is the most familiar. Quantum mechanics describes physical systems not as having definite properties at all times, as the block universe requires, but as existing in superpositions of possible states whose properties are genuinely indeterminate until a measurement is performed. The electron does not have a definite position before it is measured. It has a wave function that assigns probability amplitudes to all possible positions, and the act of measurement selects one of those positions, apparently at random, with probabilities given by the Born rule. In the block universe, this is deeply problematic. If the block is a fixed four-dimensional geometry in which every event is already determined, what is the status of quantum indeterminacy? If the electron's position at some future time is already a fixed feature of the block, in what sense is it genuinely indeterminate before measurement? The block universe appears to require a determinism that quantum mechanics explicitly violates. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics attempts to resolve this by extending the block universe into a higher dimensional structure, a branching geometry in which every quantum measurement outcome is realized in a separate branch of the universal wave function. In this picture, the block is not a single four-dimensional geometry, but an enormously complex branching structure in which all possible histories are simultaneously real. The determinism of the block is restored. The universal wave function evolves deterministically, but at the cost of an uncountable proliferation of equally real branches, most of which contain no observers and none of which can communicate with the others. The price of saving the block is a multiverse of staggering ontological extravagance, and the concept of probability within this structure requires a justification that remains, after decades of effort, genuinely unresolved. The second tension is deeper and less often discussed. The block universe is a static structure. Nothing in it changes. Nothing in it moves. The world lines are fixed curves in the geometry, and the geometry itself is fixed. But experience is not static. Experience is, by its very nature, temporal. To experience anything is to experience it as occurring now, as distinct from what came before and what will come after. The felt passage of time, the sense that the present is advancing, that the future is becoming the past, that duration is real, is not an optional feature of experience that could in principle be absent. It is the structure of experience itself. Remove temporal passage from experience, and you do not have a purer or more accurate experience. You have no experience at all. Experience is intrinsically temporal in a way that the block universe, with its static geometry and its absent present, cannot accommodate from within its own resources. This is not simply the observation that the block universe conflicts with the appearance of temporal flow. It is the observation that the block universe provides no account whatsoever of why there is any appearance at all. The block is a geometric structure. Geometric structures do not have appearances. They do not have insides. They do not generate perspectives. The block universe, taken as a complete description of physical reality, is a description from which experience has been entirely abstracted away, a view from nowhere, a description of a universe as it would appear to an observer outside time, which is to say, an observer that does not and cannot exist. And the question of why the universe described from inside rather than from outside presents itself as flowing and present and temporally dynamic. This question the block universe not only fails to answer, but structurally prohibits itself from asking. The tension between the static geometry of the block and the dynamic character of experience is not a peripheral puzzle. It is the central unresolved problem of the foundations of physics, and its resolution requires not an adjustment to the block universe picture, but a fundamental reconception of the relationship between the geometric structure of space-time and the process by which that structure is experienced from within. Here is section 2. The reconception begins with a question that the block universe picture never adequately poses. What is the relationship between the geometric structure of space-time and the physical process by which Any particular event within that structure comes to be definite. The block universe presents all events as equally real, equally present, equally fixed in the geometry, but this presentation is made from outside the geometry, from the perspective of the complete four-dimensional structure viewed as a whole. From inside the geometry, the situation is different. From inside, events are not all simultaneously accessible. They are accessible in a specific order, determined by the causal structure of the light cone at each position, and the process by which events become accessible, the process by which what was causally ahead becomes causally present, and then causally behind, is not described by the geometry itself. The geometry describes the relationships between events. It does not describe the process by which those relationships are traversed. That process is what experience is, and it requires a physical account that the block universe alone cannot provide. The physical account that the block universe requires as its complement is found in quantum mechanics, specifically in the process of quantum state reduction. In the quantum mechanical description of any physical system, the transition from a superposition of possible states to a definite actual state is a genuine physical event. It is not merely an update in the knowledge of an observer, it is an objective change in the physical description of the system. The selection of one outcome from among the possible outcomes encoded in the wave function. This selection is what produces definite facts. Without it, the quantum description remains a superposition of possibilities, and no definite event occurs. With it, a specific outcome is registered, a specific fact is produced, and the causal chain of the universe advances by one step. Roger Penrose's proposal that this objective reduction is not an arbitrary postulate but a physically grounded process triggered by a threshold in the quantum geometry of spacetime locates the production of definite events in the structure of the spacetime manifold itself. When a quantum superposition reaches the threshold at which the gravitational difference between the superposed mass distributions constitutes a quantum uncertainty in spacetime geometry on the order of one Planck unit, the superposition resolves, a definite outcome is selected, a definite event is produced, and the four-dimensional block in the region corresponding to that event acquires a definite geometric fact where previously there was quantum indeterminacy. The block is not a completed structure that exists in advance of all events. It is a structure that is being written event by event through the continuous process of quantum state reduction. The geometry is not static. It is being generated, and the generation is the process that experience from inside registers as the flow of time. This is the resolution of the tension between the block universe and the experience of temporal passage. The block, viewed from outside, appears static, a completed four-dimensional geometry containing all events. But there is no outside. There is no perspective from which the completed block is visible. Every perspective that exists is a perspective from within the block, at a specific position in the geometry, with access only to the events in its causal past. And from within, the block is not completed. It is being completed continuously through the reduction events that generate its classical content. The region of the block that lies in the causal future of any given position is not yet geometrically definite. It is quantum, a superposition of possible geometric configurations, each with a probability amplitude, none of which has yet been selected. The future is not a fixed region of the block that has not yet been reached. It is a region that does not yet exist as definite geometry. It is real as quantum possibility. It is not yet real as classical fact. This distinction between quantum possibility and classical fact is the distinction between future and past that the block universe in its standard formulation cannot make. On the standard formulation, past and future are distinguished only by causal accessibility, not by ontological status. Both are equally real features of the complete geometry. But on the quantum-corrected account, the distinction is ontological. The past is the region of the block where quantum reduction has already occurred, where definite classical facts have been selected and fixed in the geometry. The future is the region where reduction has not yet occurred, where the geometry remains quantum indeterminate, genuinely open, and the present is the frontier of reduction, the locus where quantum possibility is currently being converted into classical fact, where the block is currently being written, where experience is currently occurring. The present is not an illusion. It is the most physically significant location in the universe. It is where the universe is doing its fundamental work, the work of selecting definite reality from quantum possibility, of converting the indeterminate into the actual, of writing the geometric record that the block universe describes. And you are at the present, not by coincidence, but by necessity. You are constituted by the reduction events that are currently occurring at the frontier of your causal history. Your experience of now is not a psychological artifact superimposed on a static geometry. It is the interior of the reduction process, what it is like from inside to be the locus at which the universe is currently generating classical fact. Now consider what this means for the simultaneity of your lives. The block universe, as ordinarily presented, implies that all moments of your life are equally real, that the child and the adult and the dying person coexist in the geometry with equal ontological status. This implication is correct, but it requires the quantum correction to be fully understood. The past moments of your life, the events that lie in your causal past, where reduction has already occurred, are fixed features of the classical geometry. They are definite, they are permanent, they will not change. The child you were is not a memory that might fade or a record that might be lost. It is a definite region of the four-dimensional manifold, fixed by the reduction events that occurred there, as geometrically permanent as any mathematical truth. The future moments of your life, the events that lie in your causal future, are not yet definite. They are quantum, a superposition of possible trajectories, each with a probability amplitude, none of which has yet been selected. They are real as possibility. They are not yet real as geometry. So the correct picture is not that all moments of your life are simultaneously present in the same sense. The past moments are present as classical geometry, definite, fixed, permanent. The future moments are present as quantum superposition, real but not yet definite. And the present moment is the boundary between them, the location of the current reduction event, the point at which the quantum superposition of your possible futures is collapsing into the classical geometry of your actual past. You are, right now, at the edge of your own existence in the most literal sense available to physics. Behind you is the completed geometric record of everything you have been. Ahead of you is the quantum superposition of everything you might become, and you as an experiencing subject are the process of selection occurring at the boundary between them. This reframes the concept of identity across time in a way that neither the standard block universe picture nor the ordinary psychological account fully captures. Your identity is not constituted by a continuous physical substance, the same matter persisting through time. The matter changes completely over the course of a life. Nor is it constituted by a continuous psychological narrative, the same memories and personality traits linking past to present to future. Narratives can be disrupted, memories can be lost, personalities can change radically. Your identity, at the level the physics ultimately supports, is constituted by the continuous thread of reduction events that runs from your birth to your present moment, the causal chain of quantum selections that has written the specific geometric trajectory through the block that is your world line. You are not the matter. You are not the narrative. You are the causal chain of reductions. You are the specific sequence of quantum selections that has produced, event by event, the classical history that is your life. This has a precise implication for the question of which moments of your life are most fundamentally you, on the ordinary psychological account. Personal identities anchored in memory and narrative, in the connections between past and present that allow a current self to identify with earlier and later versions. On the geometric account, all moments of your world line are equally part of the four-dimensional object that constitutes your complete existence. There is no privileged moment that is more you than the others. The 7-year-old and the dying person are both fully realized features of the same geometric object, connected by the causal chain of reductions that runs continuously between them. The sense that the present self is more real than the past or future self is a consequence of causal accessibility, not of ontological priority. The present self has direct causal access to its own current state. It has indirect access through memory to past states. It has probabilistic access through anticipation to future states, but none of these asymmetries in accessibility corresponds to an asymmetry in existence. All states of the world line exist, all of them are you. The present is simply the state from which the others are currently being accessed.